Hey everyone, in today's lecture video, we're going to talk about thesis statements and how to elevate them. So you've probably heard about thesis statements and you probably know that they're very important in your essay. And if you haven't heard about them, or maybe you have heard about them, but you're not quite sure how to write one, it's okay because we're going to start from step one. So why are they so important, right? Why are thesis statements so important? Well, first, it tells the reader what to expect in the rest of the paper. So there's nothing more frustrating for a reader than reading an essay and maybe you're like a page in, 2 pages in, and you're not quite sure where the writer is going. There seems to be no focus, no sense of direction. And so having a thesis statement helps with that. It helps the writer also stay focused and organized. So why is that? Let's say you are drafting your essay and you start with your point or your working thesis statement. Then having that thesis statement helps guide you in writing the rest of that paper because everything you write has to be supporting or matching up with your thesis statement. The thesis statement also tells the reader what you're going to be writing about, which is your topic, and what you have to say about it as the writer, which is your stance or opinion. And it also presents the main purpose of your essay. So thesis statements just have two essential components. You just need a topic and opinion. The topic is the subject you choose to discuss in your essay, and the opinion is your stance that you choose to guide the direction of the essay or the point you're trying to make about that topic. So, in other words, a thesis statement should contain what you're going to discuss in the paper and what you have to say about it. So, thesis statements are usually about 1 to 2 sentences long, and they're located at the end or towards the end of the introduction. So, let's say you have an introduction that goes 2 paragraphs long. Then you would put the thesis statement at the end of the second paragraph. They should also be clear, specific, and arguable, and we're going to go into the criteria of what makes a strong thesis statement. They should never be your title, it should never be the first sentence of your paper, and you don't need to put in any supporting details or evidence or explanation into the thesis statement or the introduction. Right? So in general, the introduction is just a way to engage the reader and sort of create that bridge from their world into the world of your paper. So in it, you never have to really go into detail or explain anything. You could save all of that for the body. So what makes a strong thesis statement? First, they're statements, not questions. So for example, let's say you're writing a paper and your thesis statement is, should JFK High School ban certain books? As a reader, I would be like, I don't know, you tell me, you're the writer, right? What do you think? What point are you trying to make? So make sure that they're always statements and not questions. So instead, we could say JFK High School should not ban books. So the second quality of a strong thesis statement is that there has to be some kind of argumentation, some level of it. So make an argument, not just a topic. You have to have some stance or position you're taking or some direction you're going in. So the level of argumentation can be different for different types of papers. So most academic writing, it all has some kind of argument. So even your narrative essay has an argument. Instead, we called it a point, but it's almost the same thing. So through your story in the narrative essay, you are trying to convince your reader of a certain point or message, right? And the same thing goes for all other essays. There has to be some kind of guiding direction or stance, right? So some kind of argumentation. So for example, if we say this paper will discuss the pros and cons of owning a home in Guam, with this thesis statement, we can already imagine what the rest of the paper will look like. It would be kind of like just a list, like here's some pros, here's some cons. But there's no clear opinion or stance that the writer took. So it's not very arguable, right? There's no argumentation there. So instead, we could put our opinion in it. So we could say, owning a home in Guam is the best type of investment a resident of the island can make. So now it's this writer's opinion that owning a home is the best type of investment. The third quality is debatability. So the thesis statement has to be debatable. As in other words, if you said it out loud, could someone possibly come up to you and be like, hey, I don't agree with that? If anyone could do that, then that means it's debatable and it's a strong thesis statement. Because the thesis statement must have an opinion or stance, right? It can't be a fact, right? So it's got to be your opinion. What do you think about the issue or topic you're talking about? So if anyone could come up and debate you on it, that is a strong thesis statement. But if no one would come up and disagree with you, then it's not really debatable. So for example, Guam's electrical and water infrastructure was badly destroyed after Typhoon Mawar. No one would debate me on this. If I said this out loud, no one will say, like, hey, Christina, you're wrong. Everything was great. Because we know it wasn't, right? Several villages had no water for, what was it, about 2, 3 months, right? I had no power for a month and a half. So we know that there's no one who would disagree with this. So instead, let's make it debatable, right? So the government of Guam must adopt new and more effective policies for its post typhoon response efforts. So now the writer has an opinion here. They're saying the government of Guam needs to do these things, right? So here, this is more debatable. And sometimes a thesis statement doesn't just say that something should be or should not be, or is not. Sometimes a thesis statement could offer a solution to an issue or say that there is a certain cause to an issue. So both of those could still be thesis statements. So, for example, building affordable tiny homes is the best way to help alleviate the homelessness rate on Guam. Here, the writer is saying this is the best solution, building these tiny homes. So, they're making a claim that this is the best solution. The second one, the high rate of homelessness on Guam is an institutional problem and is a result of a lack of government outreach and concern when it comes to poverty. So here the writer is making a claim that this is the cause, these are the main causes of that high rate of homelessness. The fifth quality of a strong thesis statement is that the topic has to be just right. So do you remember the story of Goldilocks? Right? Goldilocks went into the bear's home and she thought dad's porridge was too hot, mama's porridge was too cold, but the baby's porridge was just right. So topics have to be just right. They can't be so broad or general that you possibly can't talk about it, all of that, in one essay, but it can't be so narrow that you could literally finish the essay in 3 sentences or a paragraph and you have nothing to write about. So, for example, climate change affects the entire planet in many different ways. This is so broad, so huge. You could write 100 pages on this and you still wouldn't cover everything, right? It's not narrowed down enough to something specific, right? Because we could look at all the different places in the world that are currently being affected by climate change, right? And what those effects are, right? The second one, the bunny method, is the best way to tie your shoes. This is too narrow. We would literally have nothing else to write about after a couple of sentences as to why it's the best way. Oh, because you just make this loop, then you do that loop, then you tie it, and it's easy, and then we're done, right? So these are examples of too broad and too narrow topics. So, how do we take a really broad topic and narrow it down to where it's just right enough? Right? So, let's take the environment, for example. Environment is a very huge topic. You could look at anything in the environment, right? So, let's kind of narrow it down, thinking about it in a specific context. So, maybe sometimes you can look at who it's going to impact, what it's impacting, or why it's occurring, right? So, those are some of the ways that you can narrow a topic down. So we start with the environment, but let's make it more specific. Maybe I want to look at the destruction of the environment. But that's still really huge too, because there's a lot of things in our environment that are being destroyed by, invasive species, humans, etc. Right? So let's look at something more specific. Okay, so let's look at the destruction of native plant species. Okay, and make it even more specific, let's just look at the destruction of native plant species by invasive species. Okay, but where? Right? We could look at any place in the world. So we got to narrow it down, at least to the location, maybe. So let's just look at Guam. But also, we have a lot of native plant species being destroyed, right, by invasive species. So we got to make it more specific. So let's just look at Guam's dying coconut trees caused by the invasive rhino beetles. So now we have a topic that's just right. So we may have a topic, but it's not a complete thesis statement yet because it still needs the opinion. So now that we have a topic, let's add our opinion to it. So my opinion is that these dying coconut trees are caused by the invasive rhino beetles. It threatens local culture, agriculture, and ecosystems. So here now we have a complete thesis statement. And here's just one more example of two broad topics versus two narrow topics. So TikTok is the best app. Way too broad, right? Because there's so many apps out there and so many different kinds of apps that do different things. So if we were to write this paper, we would have to compare TikTok to everything, right? Not only Facebook or Snapchat, but we'd have to compare it to maybe like the Hulu app, the Netflix app, Discord, Twitch, right? It's never ending. So let's narrow it down a little bit more. So we might say, oh, TikTok is the best social media app. But this is still too broad too, because think about it. There are different kinds of social media apps. They have ones for gaming, right? Like Discord. And then you have ones like Pinterest where, you just share links and photos. So, and there's Reddit, which is like a forum based social media app. So it's just too much. It's still too broad. But how about this? TikTok is the best social media app for sharing videos. So the thing with the thesis statement is, like I said in the beginning, it contains what you're going to talk about in the paper, right? So if you say you're going to look at how it's the best social media app for sharing videos, you can only talk about how it's good for sharing videos. You cannot discuss anything else in your paper, right? So it's too narrow. We're only going to talk about, oh yeah, you click this button, you press the share, you could send it to WhatsApp, you can get a link, you can repost it on Instagram, etc., and then you're done, right? So this is too narrow because you wouldn't be able to talk about anything else. You wouldn't be able to talk about how TikTok has a great algorithm, a great online community, etc. You can't talk about any of those things. So instead, we got to make it just right. So TikTok is the most effective social media app for engaging with different members of the global community. We're still specific enough where we're just going to look at how TikTok allows other people to engage with everyone around the world, but we don't have to look at everything. We're also going to look at the different types of thesis statements. So the first kind of thesis statement is the direct thesis statement. So with this one, all you do is you give your topic and opinion, of course, but then you also specifically provide the reasons or supporting points that you have that you're going to be discussing in your paper. So let's look at this example. I don't know if you guys have watched Avatar. Okay, it's been a while since I watched the animated version, but I did watch the Netflix one, and if you haven't, it's really good. You should check it out. So anyway, here's the example. Avatar The Last Airbender conveys complex social and moral issues in a way that is digestible for children through simplistic relationship developments between its characters, energetic and slapstick character personalities, and light depictions of violence. So when we break it down, we know that the direct thesis statement, we need topic, opinion, and reasons. So the topic is Avatar The Last Airbender. The writer's opinion is that the show conveys these complex issues in a way that children can easily understand. And here are the reasons that we have this opinion. So, one, the relationship developments are simple. Two, the characters are energetic and have slapstick personalities. And three, if there is violence, it is very light. With the direct thesis statement, what you should be careful of is that your supporting points should always be distinct from one another, right? So they should be different. So, for example, attending college can help young people become independent, self reliant, and self sufficient. These three supporting reasons are all the same thing. Being independent means you're self reliant and you're self sufficient. So, these supporting reasons are too similar to one another. So, instead, we should change the supporting reasons so that they're distinct. So, attending college can help young people become self sufficient, financially responsible, and hardworking. So, now we have reasons that are more different. So, with the supporting reasons in a direct thesis statement, you have to make sure that the reasons are not too concrete because then you wouldn't have much to write about. So, I know in the strategies, when we talk about the strategies, I keep saying you have to be concrete. Don't be too abstract. You need to be concrete to show your readers what you're trying to say rather than simply telling them. But with thesis statements, you don't want to have your reasons too concrete because it limits what you can write about. So for example, let's pretend this is our paper and this is our thesis statement. Deadpool is the best movie in the superhero genre because it was successful, had good actors, and was popular. Now let's imagine we wrote this paper, right? So I'm going to talk about how much money it made, right? Because it was successful and maybe if it won awards, I'm not sure. Then we're going to talk about the actors. Oh, Ryan Reynolds was in it, right? And then popularity. We'll say, oh, this many adults watched it and this many children watched it. And that's it. We've literally run out of things to write about. So these reasons are too concrete. They're too narrow, they're too concrete. So instead, you'd want to have some abstract traits in your supporting reasons. So, for example, Deadpool is the best movie in the superhero genre because it breaks norms in the genre through dark humor and meta storytelling. So now these reasons are more abstract. They're not too concrete, and we have a lot more to talk about. So, with direct thesis statements, you can use them in this course and any other courses, but the thesis statement does have its limitations. So, this thesis statement, you cannot have more than 3 supporting reasons. And really think about it. If you're only limited to 3 reasons, you may not have much to write about, right? Depending on the type of paper you're writing or the topic, right? So it could be limiting in that sense because let's say you have 4 or 5 supporting reasons. But if you are someone who needs help with structure, organization, and flow, this is a great thesis statement to use because it pretty much is an outline of how your body's going to look. So, what do I mean by that? So you have supporting reason 1, supporting reason 2, supporting reason 3 in your thesis statement. That's what you do in the body. First paragraph of the body is your supporting reason 1, second paragraph of the body is supporting reason 2, and etc. So in that way, it's great for structure and organization, but just keep in mind that it doesn't always work, especially when you have more to talk about. So the next type of thesis statement is an indirect thesis statement, or sometimes we call it implicit thesis statement. So all this does is you give topic and opinion, but you don't include any supporting reasons. So for example, Barbie is a positive role model for not only women, but the whole of American society as well. Our topic is Barbie. Our opinion is that she's a positive role model for American society, and supporting reasons, none. The reader has to read the rest of the essay to find out why Barbie is a positive role model. So this type of thesis statement is great because it allows you to give your opinion without giving anything away. So you kind of create suspense, right? Because the reader has to read the rest of the paper. This thesis statement is also great for any type of essay, right? Multi-layered arguments or smaller essays. And this kind of thesis statement is also crucial to understanding how to write at the higher level. So what do I mean by that? As you maybe get into higher level courses and you write more complex papers or research papers, not all arguments are limited to 3 supporting points. You'll find that sometimes there's like 6 or 7, right? It could be more. And if you feel that your indirect thesis statement seems too vague or unclear, right, and you feel like because of that you want to put supporting reasons, it could just actually be that your opinion or your stance or your direction is just not very clear and it's kind of lacking in the thesis statement. So, regardless of whether or not you use a direct or indirect thesis statement, try to create thesis statements that are more complex. So, tackle issues with a certain complexity, right? Instead of repeating popular arguments or popular sentiments or things that people already believe, right? And sometimes challenging the popular opinion actually makes your essay stand out. So, for example, despite concerns over privacy, TikTok empowers users to influence global trends and political discourse. So, the popular opinion nowadays, or the belief, right, what we know is that there is this ongoing concern about TikTok and our data and privacy, right? So instead of just following that same argument, we can argue the opposite. That instead of this, even though it could possibly have this negative side to it, it's still a very positive force. So why would we call these examples simple thesis statements? So the first one, The best way to build muscle is to increase your protein intake, progressively lift heavier, and steadily increase your repetitions. I mean, yes, you could still kind of write a paper on this, but it's too simple because everyone, pretty much almost everyone, believes this, right? Anyone who goes to the gym to build muscle, right? Bodybuilders, they know this. This is the method that they have a consensus, right? Eat your protein. You got to do progressive overload, right? Increase your reps. So because this is something most people already believe, or it's a popular sentiment, it's not very complex, right? Second one, social media is bad because it negatively affects mental health. So maybe 5, 10 years ago, this was a very arguable thesis statement, right? But there's so much research that has been done already that shows us how much of a negative impact social media can have on our mental health. And Facebook has even done their own studies on this. So this is something what I would say is not really complex anymore, and it's just honestly quite overdone, right? Exercise is good for your health. People believe this. This is a very popular sentiment already, right? So this is a simple thesis statement. Online classes benefit stay-at-home mothers who want to go to college. And again, this is something where no one's really going to disagree with you on, and it's something that everyone already believes or supports. Vaping is bad for your health. So this one could sort of still be arguable, but we're kind of seeing more research coming out that it is indeed bad for you. It's bad for your health. So I would say this is kind of similar to saying smoking is bad for your health, right? We kind of know this. It's kind of the popular sentiment already. So another way to elevate your thesis statement is to choose a verb that is stronger or more nuanced. So verbs are the backbone of the sentence, right? In the English language, you have to have a verb. It can't be a complete sentence without a verb. And the verb is the action. So instead of using basic verbs like continues, shows, increases, is, right? Think about verbs that have different meanings but could mean the same thing, right? But they have a different feeling to them. So instead of continues, you could say perpetuates. Instead of increases, you can say strengthens, right? Or you could say establishes, produces, right? So there's so many verbs, right? Try to play around with stronger, more nuanced verbs. Okay, we're almost there. I know you've been hanging on this long. We're almost there. So a couple don'ts before I go. So avoid making announcements, right? By announcements, I mean, I'm going to do this now. This paper will do this now. I will now talk about this, right? Because announcements, it weakens your tone of authority. So instead of sounding confident and polished, it just sounds kind of unsure or tentative. It also is redundant because it just takes up space without really adding substance, right? It's just redundant. And it also breaks the formal tone of the paper because it's self referential. Right? So, for example, instead of saying, I'm going to talk about this, or the subject of this essay is Guam's rising crime rate and how it arises from a lack of economic instability, just give us your what you're trying to say, right? The recent increase in Guam's crime rate is a result of economic instability. Remember to avoid using general statements or broad statements, right? So, quick reminder again. Example, men and women are very different. This is very broad. We could talk forever, discuss forever about the differences, right? So, instead, make it more specific. Men and women are treated very differently in the workplace because of persevering societal perceptions and institutional biases. And remember to avoid making your thesis statement too narrow where you have nothing to write about, right? So, for example, Guam is the ideal location for Micronesian students to attend college because airfare from Ponape is cheaper to Guam than to Hawaii. It's too narrow. We're only going to look at the price of the plane ticket, right? So instead, broaden it up a little bit, make it just right. So Guam is the ideal location for students in the other Micronesian islands or from countries in Asia to attend college, as Guam is the economic, cultural, and social hub of the Pacific. And last slide. Remember, thesis statements are not facts, right? They should be debatable and have some level of argumentation. So, for example, Guam's weather is hotter and more humid compared to the other islands in Micronesia because the island is located right on the equator. This is a fact. We are on the equator. No one will debate you on this. So instead, have some kind of opinion there. So Guam's weather offers the best climate for the cultivation of water sports such as paddling, surfing, and bodyboarding. Okay, before I go, you will have to write a thesis statement for your definition essay, invention, and brainstorming worksheet. Okay, so remember, it's just topic and opinion. So for most of you, your topic, you already have it, right? Which would be the term that you're defining, right? The subject or word that you're defining. So that's your topic, and what's your opinion on it? Maybe your opinion is that um, people, like, let's say my term is gym rat, right? Your opinion could be that people view that term in such a negative way when it's untrue. And that's an opinion, right? That's a topic and opinion right there. So it's a working thesis statement. Your thesis statement might change as you begin to outline or draft, which is okay, right? When a thesis statement changes, it's fine, right? If you go in another direction, you just want to make sure that everything you write in your paper matches the thesis statement. So, for example, let's say you've written the whole paper, but now it does not match the thesis statement, and that happens to me all the time. Just change your thesis statement to match the rest of the paper. That would be the easiest way. But it's great to already start with a working thesis statement before you begin drafting so you kind of already know what direction you're going to go in.